develop some what is called polio syndrome, and so that's why we have that's why polio have refused to leave Nigeria. Why we're asking why? Why? Because it's as if it's from one infection to another, and wherever the symptom is seen, people are the worst for it, especially those who are affected, and even their caregivers as well.
Now, the good question is, the good question, Blessing, is health experts have attributed many factors to these, but that's suffice to say that Nigeria is one of the 3 countries in the world, and that's including Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the only African country, Blessing, as you have indicated earlier, that are yet to be certified poliomyelitis free. And as long as this virus still exists in any part of the world, experts say children all over the world remain vulnerable.
And that's why the next 6 months or so is considered very critical for Nigeria. What will happen is that, provided that there are no new cases of the virus, Nigeria will then submit her final country data for evaluation in March 2020. So what needs to be done? How can the momentum of this past 3 years be sustained? Well, I'm sure you have other questions. Could there be reinfection? What more do the health practitioners need to do to sustain this particular victory? Let's use their word. Well, these are some of the questions we hope our guests will provide answers to, and I'm sure they will do just that. Different organizations, development partners have been in this fight.
Yeah.
CSOs, the health, the Federal Ministry of Health in Nigeria too.
You have Rotary. The Rotary Club has been a very, very great partner in the fight against, polio in Nigeria. The World Health Organization is also there. They've done a great job. I think since 1986 or 81, 86. They've been on this to ensure that the world is polio free and Nigeria becomes polio free. And I hope that in the next 6 months nothing will come up, and after that nothing will also come up, and will continue to be free of polio. Children can enjoy good health and live a life that is devoid of sickness.
Thank God for sustained awareness, and also the push by the government of Nigeria as well in the different capacity, even through primary health, vaccination, immunization here and there. People are encouraged to actually make sure that we kick polio truly out of the continent, out of the country and out of the continent as well. So that's our focus this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. We appreciate your company as usual. My name is Blessing Abu. Thank you for joining us.
Did you say my name is Blessing? Were you forgetting your name?
No. No, I said, as usual, joining us. No, I can't forget my name. It's an identity.
Joking.
I know.
I'm Rhoda Alon. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. It's the last for the week. It's the Friday's edition of the program, and we're broadcasting live as always from on Africa's largest TV network, NTA, and we are in our studios here in Abuja, Nigeria. As always, we have a complimentary segments. We have a newspaper review, sports, foreign, entertainment. But the news comes first, and Chimobi Walter Naji is here with us for the news this morning. Chimobi, it's good to see you again. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course, I understand what you mean, Rhoda. It's good to see you. Good morning, and good morning, Blessing. Of course, I hope you had a very wonderful night rest. Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to the morning news. We'll start the morning news with infrastructural development, where a multi-billion naira regional water supply expansion project has been inaugurated in Zaria towards addressing the perennial water shortage in the ancient city and environs. President Muhammadu Buhari, who performed the ceremony, urged the beneficiaries to jealously guard the facility and pay their bills promptly so that the project can be sustainably maintained. The president also visited the Zazzau, where he restated his commitment to a greater Nigeria.
Funding of the construction of the multi-purpose 186.1 million cubic meters Galma Dam as a contribution to this project underlines our firm resolve to continue to put in place policies and execute projects that will change the narratives for Nigerians. This is why, in spite of lean resources, we committed the sum of 11.8 billion naira towards this dam and so to its completion. We are hopeful that this partnership will continue as we seek to reach out to other communities cities and states in Nigeria to provide water facilities and other essential services. Water infrastructure investments such as this one will serve for decades, but only if they are well managed and well maintained.
We are providing meters, and there is also a framework for social metering. For those that are too poor to afford water, there is a subsidy system so that the poorest people will still have access to clean water. This is consistent with the manifesto of the APC and what we've always preached to us, to ensure that in everything we do, social justice must take precedence over everything else.
And in the same vein, President Muhammadu Buhari also inaugurated the newly completed Postgraduate Center of Excellence at the Ahmadu Bello University ABU Zaria, constructed and donated to the school by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The president said the construction of the project was a testimony to his administration's effort at supporting qualitative learning from the primary through to the tertiary levels.
We are committed and determined to continue to fund our vital institutions, even in the face of limited financial resources. In line with this renewed commitment, during the past 4 years, we have invested close to 1.3 trillion naira towards the development of our educational sector. This amount does not include funds spent on overheads and personnel costs. Access to quality education in tertiary institutions will enable young Nigerians to make meaningful contributions towards the development of our nation, irrespective of birth, income status, religion, or ethnicity.
President Muhammadu Buhari there speaking in Zaria on health. Talking health now, Nigeria is making significant progress towards eradication of polio in the country, and August 21st makes it exactly 3 years. The country has not recorded any incidences of wild poliovirus. Now, this is a filler coming from the 96th meeting of the National Economic Council this Thursday in Abuja, which is seeing this as a risk signal that the nation will be certified polio-free by the World Health Organization.
The minister identified some challenges as follows. The lack of release of counterpart funds by the local government chairman is one of the key problems in achieving successful routine immunization. He also identified the issue of insecurity in some parts of the country, particularly in the Northeast. He advocated the release of funds by states and local governments for immunization campaigns.
Now, as Nigeria counts down to being certified polio-free nation, communal engagements through extensive public enlightenment on the health benefits of immunization has been recommended as a way of realizing this. Now, this is one of the recommendations of frontline healthcare providers of the European Union Support to Immunization Governance in Nigeria project at a seminar in Abuja.
200 million since 2002. So this is investing directly in the most valuable that we have in our society, namely our youth and our children, and making sure that they have the opportunities that they need.
If EU sign is not in your state as a specific state, what they do at the national trickles down to other states that don't have any contribution there. Yeah.
Over the next 6 months, we will go through a rigorous process, and hopefully in the course of next year, it's possible that Africa could be certified polio-free.
And now turning our attention to judicial matters. The Presidential Election Petition Court has dismissed the petition of the Hope Democratic Party and its candidate, Ambrose Owuru. In a unanimous judgment, the 5-man petition court, led by Justice Muhammad Garba, gave the verdict.
Referendum for election into the office of president or governor in this country at all.
In another development now, the federal government says it will investigate and prosecute all individuals and organizations involved in the process that led to $9 billion court award against Nigeria over an unexpected gas contract. Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, stated this while laying a roadmap for the nation's justice ministry in the next 4 years.
We therefore cannot afford to fail on account of lawless acts of the corrupt and unpatriotic few who always drive pleasure in seeing us fail as a nation. The law must work. It must speak its firm language of justice at all times.
And now to other stories. The federal government has flagged off the voluntary repatriation of more than 60,000 Nigerian refugees in Cameroon with the airlift of the first batch of 135 refugees who are indigents of Adamawa State back to Yola, the state capital. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadia Umar Farouk, who is also the chairperson of the Tripartite Technical Working Group comprising Nigeria, Cameroon and the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, supervised the repatriation of the first batch at the Marou Salak International Airport in the far north region of Cameroon in her first official assignment as minister.
This repatriation is very key because it demonstrates the willingness and readiness of both countries to support these refugees, to protect them, as well as to bring them back home in safety and in dignity.
Now, the first batch of 135 Nigerian refugees comprising 25 females has already arrived in Yola and are being profiled at a reception camp pending when they will be resettled to their respective communities. And those are the stories that we're monitoring on the morning news at the moment. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Blessing and Rhoda just after the break. Thank you very much for watching.
Chief, good morning, sir. You are here already?
No, now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I am sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back. If you just tuned in, the program is Good Morning Nigeria. We're showing live from Abuja, Nigeria's beautiful capital. And it's on network service of the NTA. Nigeria and the United Kingdom signed a memorandum of understanding to increase bilateral trade in the non-oil export. Let's get more details about this as well as other stories with Comfort Amodu.
Under the Memorandum of Understanding, the United Kingdom, through the Prosperity Fund Global Trade Programme, will provide Nigeria with assistance to boost economic growth and combat poverty for sustainable development. The Executive Director of Nigerian Export Promotion Council, Olusegun Awolowo, who signed on behalf of the federal government, says the agreement will be implemented through capacity building aimed at preparing Nigerian businesses to effectively trade with the UK and the rest of the world.
We know we can meet these standards, but we have to go through the proper training, the proper orientation to get these companies ready so they can export seamlessly into the UK.
As evinced by the outfit I'm wearing, I'm absolutely convinced that Nigeria can meet the quality standards required for export. The issue is getting the processes in place that will take those exports forward.
The interventions will be in the area of training and technical support, market access and business linkages, development of goods, clearance plan and certification, among others. And the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, NIET, has released a pilot study report on the sale of Nigerian's crude and gas produced in 2017. The 136-page report, which is part of Strategy to Demystify the Oil and Gas Industry, focuses on the sale, federation share of production by types, allocation, uses, details of revenues derived from the sales, the receiving accounts and allocation of the revenues. A breakdown of the report shows that the total crude oil production for 2017 was 692 million barrels. Out of this volume, the share that went to the Federation was 240.9 million barrels, representing 35% of the total crude oil production for the year under review. This is 4% higher than what was obtained in 2016, but 19% lower than the barrels for 2015. The pilot report also shows that the Federation crude went to 29 destinations in 2017. A statement from the Director of Communications and Advocacy, Oji Ogbonnaya Oji, says the pilot study does not cover other revenue streams from the sector such as petroleum, profit tax, royalties, signature bonuses, dividends, penalties and fees, as well as statutory payments. And next is the closing figures of trades on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, which moved up by 1.01%, with investors gaining 134.62 billion naira. With business news, I'm Comfort Amadou.
Thank you very much, Comfort Amadou, for that business news package. Up next on Good Morning Nigeria, it's the newspaper review segment.
For this today's edition, Bayo is available as well. Bayo Tebi, good morning and welcome to this review segment.
Good morning, Rhoda.
Good morning,
Nigeria.
Good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
All right, but let's begin the review with stories from the blueprint. And the blueprint, let's just start below the nameplate of the blueprint. It says we've invested 1.3 trillion naira in education since 2015. Statement there attributed to President Muhammadu Buhari. Federal government to recover 6.4 billion naira debt from states. That's on page 5. And just beside that, women farmers lament low budgetary allocation to agri sector. And Akinto emerges Yoruba leader. That's on page 8. And, of course, the lead story, that's the big one for the blueprint this morning. Presidency on trader money. Monarchs, government officials take bribes from beneficiaries. Says Osun, Kanu, Jigawa, Katsina, Benue, Niger, guilty. Takes case to EFCC, ICPC, laments non-persecution. That's the lead story on the blueprint this morning. Let's quickly move down to the bottom of the paper. Thousands trapped as Boko Haram seizes Gubio, Maigumeri local government. Survivors join Maiduguri IDPs, and we've propelled attacks. That's some riders just below that. That's a statement there by the army. How gunmen abducted Sokoto lawmaker, says police. That's on page 5. And then I'll set new security agenda for the nation, says Aregbesola. That's on page 8. And Kogi government boasts a victory at primaries. That's Kogi governor boasts a victory at primaries. IPAC wants REC redeployed. That's on page 32. Why we attacked Ekorimadu IPOP. That's on page 23 of the blueprint. Those are the stories trending. Of course, you need to get a paper to read and see what's inside.
Okay. Let's look at some stories from the Nigerian pilot. Some of them you're already taken from your paper, Ruda. Let's start with the one just below the nameplate. We have spent 1.3 trillion naira on capital projects in education. This is coming from the president. And that story is trending on page 7. Oyo Ita returns to work as Buhari rejects retirement requests. That story you find on page 9. Now, leading for the pilot this morning heads to roll over $9 billion judgments. Two riders to that story. Nigeria threatened as British court rules 20% assets in reserve be forfeited. And also banks, others aiding corrupt politicians to face persecution. More details about story on page 8. Okay, let's move down the paper. Just below the photograph, you have 17 passengers die in road accident. And the other raft of stories. Reveal closure of Akano Ibiam International Airport. Traders beg federal government. Okay, let's get Bayo to come in at this point.
All right, Bayo, let's first of all take a look at two very, very hot topics or issues. And that's one, what the president said in Zaria yesterday during the inauguration of the Center for Excellence at the university today, and the recovery of debt by federal government from states.
Okay. Well, the president revealed that his administration has spent about 1.3 trillion to support education, particularly providing critical infrastructure. And he says this is aside from the running costs that has been going on. This was during the inauguration of the Postgraduate Center of Excellence at Samaru, Zaria. This is one of 9 facilities that the Central Bank of Nigeria says it is going to build across the country. Yesterday's commission was the 3rd because there's been one at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Ibadan, and then Ahmadu Bello University. The president has assured that his administration will continue to mobilize and support education with to make it affordable, qualitative, and competitive. Governor of Central Bank revealed that there are 7 other centers of excellence for health that is being proposed by the Central Bank. One was to be built in each of the geopolitical zones, while one will also be at Abuja. The one in Abuja will be specifically for cardiac, that's heart problems, as well as cancer. This will have the most ultra-modern facilities, and I think that will go a long way to reducing medical tourism, because come to think about it, Nigeria is endowed with tremendous health personnel. What always take them out and why we have so many of them leaving is the lack of facilities to work. Just only last week, I think, Nigeria was appointed to head a top medical facility in California. I remember in 1979, when I was part of the NT commentary team to Saudi 89, Saudi Arabia had just established a tremendous, huge sports facility hospital. The professor in charge was Nigerian. And when we asked him, he said, well, this is where we get the facility to work. All the dollars I earn here doesn't give me satisfaction. I wish this were at home so that I can give my services to my people. So this, I think, is a very bold initiative and will go a long way. The other story is about the states have been reminded that 614 billion that was given to them as bailout is not free. They have to pay. And from the meeting of the National Executive Economic Council yesterday, the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, gave the brief by saying that on the average, 35 states, I think only one state did not take, all the others took. On the average, every state is to pay about 17.5 billion back. And so a committee has been set up to comprise representatives of Governors Forum, the Central Bank, and the Ministry of Finance to work out the modalities for payment. However, the Honorable Minister used the occasion to also highlight issues on the economy. Already he says that the medium-term expenditure framework that will determine the budget has been presented to the National Economic Council for input. She also looked at the economy and said that gross domestic product has increased from 1.89% on 2018 to about 2.10. And even the World Bank and the IMF has indicated too that the growth Nigeria economy will be just about that. On non-oil contribution to the economy, the minister also indicated that it has grown from 90.4% to 90.9%. So very soon, it probably could reach 100%. In inflation, he also indicated that from 18.7 in 2017, it's now going to 11.8. And hopefully, with the gradual improvement of the economy, we will be hitting a single-digit inflation rate before the end of the 4 years.
That'll be great news.
Well, one issue that was news, or that is news right now, is that Nigeria is being almost at the verge of being declared polio-free. That's what we're looking at this morning. That's a big story. Something that's also trending. But then let's look at the Daily Times. Now, the Daily Times leads with this. It says federal government vows to bring persons responsible to book, and of course 9 billion naira P and ID debt, and that's to rejig justice system and restore constitutional democracy. And just beside the nameplate says external reserves rise by 2.3%, shed $770 million in 12 days. And let's move quickly to the bottom of the paper. Presidential polls tribunal dismisses HDP Oru's petition challenging Buhari's election. Special agric zones to attract $4 billion investment, and Falana in court seek date for hearing insurers' application. Was set new security agenda for Nigeria, says Arugbeshola. That's on page 3. But the lead story there is that of the Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, yesterday when he addressed the press, saying that the federal government will bring to book those responsible for that debt.
Yes, the P and ID contract thing, Nigeria has lost about $9 billion. And the Minister of Finance also alluded to it yesterday, and he said this was very worrying. However, she expressed the optimism that the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General of the Federation, has given indication that there are possibilities of our having a good case or on appeal. And the Minister of Justice also yesterday said that all those who are involved, particularly in the past administration and even now, if they are still in government, will be held accountable for their role in it. But the good thing is that they are taking initiatives to appeal so that we can recover what we have lost. There was also the good news yesterday about 133 Nigerians who were refugees in Cameroon for over 6 years that were brought back home. The Nigerian Air Force C-130 brought them home to Yola, and they were received by the Secretary to the Adamawa State Government, Bashir Ahmed. The Honorable Minister for Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Welfare, Hajia Sadia Farouk, was also there. He said that they will all be looked after. They will be settled with the state government in internally displaced facility, and after being given training, they will eventually be returned home to their place. But there are others who are still there and are yet to be brought. Those of them from Borno and Yobe are still there. They all left Nigeria during the
wake of the insurgency.
Yes, the insurgents attack, and they had to take refuge in there. And they were very grateful for the courtesy and cooperation of the Cameroon authorities.
Anyway, let's hope and make them as comfortable, since we're going to bring them back from another part of outside the shores of the country. Let's get them resettled quickly. That will truly make them free from that refugee status. And good enough, we have a new ministry under Sadia Farouk. Okay, Bayo, let's take a look at the editorial for today, which is coming from the Daily Independent. It's on page 16, and it's looking at the strange case of a high-profile kidnapper. The rearrest of Hamisu Bala Wadube, an alleged kidnap kingpin, who was reportedly freed by some Nigerian soldiers recently in Ibi, Taraba State, provides an excellent opportunity to unearth the well-organized kidnapping ring operated by this suspect and the various connections he has maintained with security operatives.
Yes, the editorial is happening on the successes of the police, particularly in nipping kidnapping. But not only that, in fact, there's a report also about banditry, where a 20-year-old chap was arrested in Katsina, and he says that he was recruited as a header into Dinya Forest, but eventually what they ended up doing with his boss, who he called Surajo, was to be raiding shops and villages and dispossessing people of their property. He has now been arrested. And he also revealed that while they were there, a white helicopter with long propellers used to bring arms and drop the arms with a rope to them in the bush. And he still says that some of them, the bandits, are still there in the bush. That reveals that there is a critical network that is working on that.
Because who can just afford an helicopter?
Yes.
It's not just ordinary people's business.
Certainly. And the blueprint has also reported that the Wadume man, Hamisu Bala Wadume, has revealed that he paid huge sums of money 3 weeks before his capture to the accounts of senior military officer. He also said that he's not the only one. There are several others on his payroll who he was working with. And he said that 2 persons, they gave their name. One is Zubairu, the other is Baba Gurus. They were the ones who actually alerted the officer about Wadume's capture, and he directed that he should be rescued at all costs. He also indicated that he was taken to the barracks, and from the barracks he was taken to his home, and the officer invited the welder to cut off the handcuffs and the leg chain before he was freed. So these are the information, and the editorial is happening on the fact that these police officers must not have died in vain. Those who are involved in it must be brought to book, and they are appealing that the Presidential Investigating Panel must unravel this kidnap ring, because again the blueprint revealed that he has 3 groups of gangs that operate between Taraba and Nasarawa states, and if from him they are likely to get a lot of information about the network that is behind
this
it.
should not
but
just
above all, the officers that lay down their life in this cause deserve posthumous promotion so that their terminal benefit can be substantial to take care of the families they left behind.
You're right, Bayo. You're right. I hope that just follow this up, really, because if we have such high networking criminals and infiltrating our security operatives, then you wonder why issue of insecurity is still on the increase. Anyway, Bayo, that'll be it for today and indeed the week. We hope to see you again on Monday.
See you on Monday then. Thank you.
All right. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. To kickstart our conversation, which are taking a look at the status, the 3 years of wild polio-free status in Nigeria. We'd like to take this background report by Abdusalam Jibril, and you will get to meet our guests.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
The Global Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in its 2014 report, revealed that Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria are countries that were endemic to the wild polio virus. 3 years ago, however, through sustained efforts, Nigeria was on the brink of being declared free of the wild polio virus by the World Health Organization. There was a setback though, when a case of the wild polio virus was detected in Mongonu, Borno State, northeast of Nigeria. This was attributed to the insurgency, which at some point made it impossible to get polio vaccinations to some of those affected areas. This was in the face of harassment and killings of some health workers, which necessitated the involvement of the military to ensure access to affected areas. The move was said to have gone a long way in changing the situation. Nigeria afterwards commenced the journey to achieving the criteria of becoming declared a polio-free country. 3 years down the lane, Nigeria is once again on the verge of being certified polio-free. The country has been able to keep the wild polio virus at bay, which brightens her chances of getting certified as polio-free in the next few months. In the face of the current progress, however, health watchers have cautioned against complacency. Now, how can defeat of Nigeria's 3 years of a no wild polio virus status be sustained? These, as well as other questions, guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be providing answers to in the course of the program.
Yes, indeed, the guests are seated, and we are glad to be welcoming them to share this occasion of this 3 years on, and the good news is here. Well, let me start by welcoming Dr. Faisal Shaibu, is the Executive Director, National Primary Health Care Development Agency, NPHCDA. Welcome, Dr. Faisal.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers.
Also with us in the studio, I'd like to welcome the World Health Organization representative, Dr. Clement Peters.
Thank you. Good morning, listeners.
Okay, Rhoda.
And joining us also in the studio here is Dr. Tunji Funsho. He's a past district governor and chairman of Nigeria National Polio Plus Committee of Rotary International. It's good to have you join us this morning.
Thank you very much for that.
Let's begin with Dr. Faisal Shaibu. 3 years of wild polio-free status. The good news came yesterday, and I'm sure a lot of people are still wondering.
2 days ago.
2 days ago, that was Wednesday, and I'm sure a lot of people are still wondering how important is this for Nigeria, and secondly, how important is it for Africa?
Thank you very much. 2 days ago, exactly the 21st of August, 3 years without a single case of wild polio virus. That is huge. It is huge in terms of all the efforts that went into making sure that no child in Nigeria for 3 consecutive years has been paralyzed with the wild polio virus. Although it is huge, we're also well aware of how important it is for us to manage this success. It is a fragile success. This is only a milestone. Now, even more work is required in terms of intensifying and making sure that we sustain the tempo so that the process of certification, which just kicks in, will be successful.
Now, for the benefit of our viewers watching, what does poliomyelitis do when it attacks a person or a child?
Poliomyelitis paralyzes. It causes paralysis.
Okay.
But even the paralysis that we see is just a fraction of a number of kids that actually get infected.
Okay.
Some of them die. Some of them are sick for a few days. But what is very obvious are those numbers that are paralyzed and are unable to go about their normal working days. They are unable to lead normal lives because they end up being in crutches or wheelchairs. So this is why it is really very important, especially given that just 7 years ago, Nigeria was responsible for more than half the number of wild polio viruses globally. To now have a situation where Nigeria has exited that committee of nations that continuously spew out wild polio viruses is huge. Pakistan, as of the last count, had some 48 wild-type polio viruses. Afghanistan had 12. And we had even much more in terms of the numbers of wild polio viruses as recently as 7 years ago. So it is very, very huge.
Okay, let's bring in Dr. Tunji Funsho. This must be great news for Rotary because I know alongside other developmental partners too, Rotary had been doing so much in terms of the campaign Kick Out Polio Out of Africa, Kick Polio Out of Nigeria. Now End Polio Now, that's the tag on you now. And we're close to being certified free. And it's described like a race, a relay race. Just how close and how is this coming on for your organization as well?
Well, for us, it's been a very long journey internationally because we started this journey, as a matter of fact, in 1985, when Rotary proposed to World Health Organization that this is something that can be done because we did a pilot project in the Philippines a few years earlier, which was very successful. We got WHO convinced of that, and of course, through the vehicle of WHO, we were able to get the World Health Assembly to form the Global Polio Eradication Initiative and make polio eradication a priority. So it's 3 decades more, so we're very, very delighted as to the progress we've made with the government in the lead and all supporting, that program.
Okay. Dr. Clemens? This same question is coming to you. Nigeria, of course, being the only country on the continent, has been giving different bodies that's a pain that we should actually have been able to do this. But we're close to it. How great is this news for WHO?
This is great because it means we're at the brink of making history. Nigeria being the last country in Africa, the African region, this means the whole of Africa region will be certified polio-free, hopefully by middle of next year. And it means we salute the government, that leadership from the government. We embrace the partnership that help us to move to this level. And importantly, the parents who have taken the responsibility ensure that they protect the children by accepting the vaccines, get the children to be vaccinated, and find out our health workers who even through difficult situations able to reach all the children. Now the task is more rigorous for us to get to the last mile. Means we need to do more in terms of supplemental immunization or immunization campaigns that are being conducted. We need to do more on the surveillance. We need to do more on outreaches and make sure every child that is eligible should be vaccinated. This should be the target. So that by March next year, Nigeria can present the papers to the African Regional Certification Committee and make sure that the whole continent is free. So this is a big success in terms of public health in the African region.
Okay, you talked about the need for us to sustain this and make sure, especially for the hard-to-reach places, which is still a great concern for all stakeholders. Now, where are these gaps, and how do you think the different stakeholders should actually work towards achieving that? Where are these gaps?
I think there is a lot of innovation, if I take the Nigerian context. The communities that cannot be reached, they try to have what they call hard-to-reach teams. These are communities, health workers from within the communities who know the terrain. Let me take example of the Northeast, where we use every opportunities. One, the military are involved. Wherever they can access, get children, they vaccinate the children. Communities that our teams hard to reach, they're hard-working, reach those communities, they give vaccines. We also interact with the neighboring countries. Wherever we have children along the borders, let's vaccinate them. And they also use things like marketplaces. So this innovation helps so that every opportunity a child should be vaccinated. And if we maintain that, I'm sure we'll get this country, the continent, free of polio.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me get back to Dr. Faisal, Rhoda. I know you're itching to ask some other questions. The last case we recorded in 2016 was a child at the IDP settlement, right? And I know several, we still have cases of different persons in the camps all over. What more effort are we doing to actually address, perhaps, well, we don't prefer a reinfection, at least that's what you're working towards. What more are we doing to actually reach out to some of these camps that could not have been reached from maybe in the last couple of years? So,
right, so we've learned from our mistakes of 2016. So we've intensified surveillance in those areas that are most likely to have kids infected with polio virus or any other type of infection. In terms of collecting data about immunization, we are doing random sampling of this case to make sure they are not harboring these virus infections. We're going to communities, not just the IDPs, right? But we're going to all communities, hard to reach areas, to look for the virus. We're checking the environment. So even if the virus is not in the kids, we're checking the environment to make sure that they are not within the environment and can easily jump. So we're working with our traditional leaders and also informing them, creating awareness around what a polio case looks like. So I have to take this opportunity to really emphasize how leadership from President Muhammadu Buhari had made a huge difference in the IDP camps in our communities. One of the first things that Mr. President did was to actually vaccinate his own granddaughter.
Yes,
that sent a very clear message about the safety of the oral polio vaccine and how he's providing leadership. In 2016, when we had an outbreak, for the very first time ever in the history of Nigeria, Mr. President directed the release of 9.8 billion naira. That is the highest amount of money that has ever been released towards polio eradication. And this was very, very instrumental in gathering all the efforts with the partnership, our development partners. We were able to do the work, working with traditional leaders, again, under the leadership of the Northern Traditional Leaders Committee on Primary Healthcare. The Sultan of Sokoto provided leadership all across the north and southern states, brought religious leaders together and say, we must leave a country to future generations where they are not threatened by the polio virus. So there's been a massive effort, and as we reach this 3-year mark, we are reflective of all the efforts that everybody has put into place. And
so
we're all
preventing
excited
outbreak
about
of vaccine-derived polio virus is still a challenge, is that?
Right. So for several decades, we had a situation in Nigeria where routine immunization was very poor. But it was only with the advent of this administration that under the transparent leadership of President Buhari, the program had the courage to say, we have to stop denying the fact that our routine immunization was poor. When surveys were done in the past, the administration will say, no, we don't agree with this surveys. These surveys will show that we're not doing a good job. And those surveys were also aligning with the fact that we kept on having outbreaks of diseases. But because of this administration's anti-corruption stance, when the surveys came out and said only 33% of kids had received Penta 3 vaccination, the government said, yes, we'll agree. We know that these are stumbling blocks to our progress, but we use those blocks as stepping stones to build a stronger routine immunization program and see where we are right now. In the last survey that was done, we've moved from around 39% coverage to 57% coverage, again, because of the leadership that the government is providing. The CVDPVs that we're seeing in some of those areas is because routine immunization has been poor. But the moment we continue to improve routine immunization, the moment we improve sanitation, we hope that we'll be able to stop those viruses. Those polio viruses, again, are completely different from the white polio viruses. As far as the white polio viruses are concerned, 3 years, not a single case.
Brilliant.
So my question is, what are the challenges that you're having right now?
Right, so the challenges that we face right now are primarily around insecurity. In those areas where our health workers are not able to consistently access kits, right? We do not want to leave any single child behind. Every single child needs to get the vaccination, and in those areas where insecurity, especially in Borno and some other northern states, access is fragmented, we're doing everything possible with the partnership with humanitarian organizations, with the military, to make sure that we reach every child with the vaccine. There's also the issue of counterpart funding, right? In some of the states and the local government areas, we're not seeing the kind of leadership that is provided, right? A number of the governors are very excited about the progress we've made. We've had discussions with them, and we're also happy about what they are doing in their states. The governors are beginning to provide counterpart funding, but we need more, especially from local government chairmen.
That's what I want you to speak to right now. Let's look at, because the truth is you couldn't have done this alone. You must have had the support of local government, state governments, local area councils, traditional rulers, religious leaders. Let's look at the role that they have played in achieving all of this.
No, it's been immense, right? So, like I mentioned, the singular most important factor in the success, though fragile, that we've achieved is the leadership that we've gotten all across levels, from the national level all the way to the vaccinators who have risked their lives, even in the most difficult circumstances, to get to the hard-to-reach areas. We've worked with traditional leaders, we've worked with religious leaders, we're working with the state governors. Of course, within the remit of the financial resources available to them, governors have provided finances to support what federal government and the partners are doing. So we continue to tell them that the job is not done yet. We still need counterpart funding, we still need their leadership, right? Apart from the funds that they provide, we need the governors to show up and, show that, this is okay, the vaccines are safe, and really communicate clearly to community members, to their citizens, that they should take their kids for routine immunization. And we're seeing governors do this increasingly.
I'm still going to stay with you, Dr. Shuaibu. Before I go to Dr. Tunji Funsho, before we look at the contributions of Rotary, how safe, because that has always been the issue that most people have had, especially educated people. I want you to enlighten us on how safe these vaccines are. There are reports here and there, whether by traditional beliefs or medical beliefs by some people, that some of these vaccines are not safe. So when your people who come out to immunize children do so, they encounter a lot of resistance from people. So speak to us on how safe it is and why every child should take this.
Without an iota of doubt, the vaccines that are given to our kids are 100% safe. There's no vaccine that is given to any child in Nigeria that is not pre-qualified by the World Health Organization. There's no vaccine that is given to any child in Nigeria that does not have the stamp of approval of NAFDAC.
Including those women or men who are on the streets just knocking on your door, your gates,
Absolutely.
Some people say, oh, please go back, my child is okay. Meanwhile, the child has not been immunized.
Right, so the oral polio vaccine is what we're talking about specifically.
Yes.
Is 100% safe. In the early 2000s, I know there was some controversy, especially in northern Nigeria, in Kano, about the safety of the vaccines. But under the leadership of traditional leaders, we went and verified everywhere that these vaccines are safe. Our traditional leaders went to the companies, to the manufacturing companies, and they saw absolute proof that these vaccines are safe. These vaccines, when they are brought to Nigeria, they are kept in cold chain systems, right? We take very seriously the issue of the safety of our citizens. So we will not allow the vaccines that we give our kids harm a single hair on the bodies of our kids, let alone cause any form of disease. So we are very, very sure about what public service means. We're very, very sure about what it means to uphold the health of our kids. So there is no doubt about it. Maybe in the past there were those concerns, but I think over time, especially when our leaders have demonstrated that they have faith in the vaccines, like Mr. President, I mentioned earlier, gave his own granddaughter the oral polio vaccines. That sent a very, very clear message to all Nigerians, right? And all the millions of people that follow him, that yes, it is safe to take these vaccines.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Shuaibu. Let's bring in Dr. Funsho. Since 1988 precisely, Rotary has partnered with the World Health Organizations, including other organizations, to see that we bring an end to polio. Now let's look at the contributions of the Rotary Club in terms of immunization.
Well, we categorize our involvement in this program in 4 thematic areas. One is advocacy. Because of our reach, Rotary is, let's just talk about Nigeria. Rotary is present in virtually every state and most local governments in this country. So when it comes to reaching the categories of people that the executive director has mentioned, be them political leaders, religious leaders, traditional leaders, we have contacts of people who know them on a personal level. And that usually works magic. When you come to people on a formal, official level, you may get this kind of reaction. But when somebody who is their friend or family member takes the same, issue to them, it opens doors. And some of the things that they might have been suspicious of or have reservations about opens the doors for them to become involved. So that is one area. Other area is the area of funding. We have a huge membership that contribute funds to this program, but also we have membership that have influence on governments across the world that advocate to government to assist in ensuring that enough funds are made available. So governments around the world, be it United States, Canada, EU, Japan through JICA, Australia, some of these funds you see coming in to the program are funds that Rotarians through advocacy have encouraged them to do. We're doing something similar in Nigeria. When budgets are presented, to the National Assembly, we engage members of the National Assembly to ensure that they don't, slash the budgets for primary health care, particularly for polio. So some of the increases we've had have been through our backdoor, approach to encourage our legislators to give polio and primary health care, top priority. Because the other area is that Rotarians appear in the field themselves during our supplementary routine immunization activities. Most of the vaccinators are young people. As you mentioned earlier, some homes, you get to the homes and they say, no. Because these are young children. They are well trained, as much as the program can afford to train them, but they don't exude the same kind of confidence that somebody like myself will exude when I knock on the door and they open and they say, what is this? Why are you always coming? I was at the primary healthcare center 3 weeks ago and they immunized my child. Why do I need to give this child this immunization again? I can explain to them. And most Rotarians who go to the field can do that with the confidence that the parents will accept. So in the field also, we assist, is not only the ignorant, poor people who cause some rejections. The elites also are part of this. So when Rotarians who are knowledgeable, who are much more mature people, engage them, they usually will now say yes, whereas initially they said no to these young children. So our field work also ensures that we help to break issues of resistance, to children, having the vaccines given to their children.
But isn't that a great burden for whether Rotary or other bodies that are involved in doing that? Because if the advocacy is not getting down deep to where it should be, whether for the elites or the people at the lower rung, as we want to call them, how much of a burden is that for the country in sustaining what has been done so far, and how do we take on that?
Well, that is our...
Because you can't be everywhere, certainly.
That's right. That is our advocacy. Also goes in the areas of creating public awareness. Beyond this particular period of time, we are always in the media, in one form or the other, and we're very, very much all over the social media advocating for polio immunization at every of these 4 thematic areas. So that is one of, on a regular basis also, you may have seen us, you've covered us on some of our road walks, carrying banners, and proclaiming the safety of the vaccines and encouraging parents and caregivers to make their children available when we go house to house, but also to use the facilities of the static centers, primary health care centers, and hospitals to make sure that the children get the full dose of routine immunization for all vaccine-preventable diseases, but in this time that we're trying to eradicate polio, specifically for polio immunization as well. So we are ensuring that all the time we're creating awareness among the public, but you always have small pockets of people who need that extra encouragement and extra, convincing to ensure that, they allow us to immunize their children.
All right. Dr. Peters, let's get back to you. There are concerns for WHO as well on some of these areas that the gentlemen have talked about. What are those concerns and what kind of redirection would you want to see going forward?
Right. First of all, what is very important is that governments, including Nigerian government, have prioritized child survival as one of their priorities in terms of the national health agenda. This is critical, it is important. The other second thing which is important is the government contribution to ensure that vaccines are available. Unlike other countries where probably government contribution is not enough to make sure these vaccines. So the government has made sure that vaccines should be available and should be free in all health facilities. This is very important. From the global perspective, the polio endgame has a strategy looking at what happens when we stop polio, which is what happens. Fundamentally, the key shift is moving towards the universal health coverage, but ensuring that vaccines are part and parcel of child survival packages, which is very important, and ensuring that the health systems should be stronger enough, including the surveillance, to make sure that the countries are able to detect if there is any problem and able to respond. But fundamentally is ensuring that there is a good health system to be able to improve child survival. So these are the directions. But then, when you look at the context of Nigeria, when you look at the health system, we know that as of now, the high out-of-pocket expenditure, which is high, this could be a barrier. But I'm happy that the government is moving ahead with the Base Healthcare Provision Fund. And with it is the whole element of the community insurance to make sure that the poor have access to services. The vaccines are available. We need to increase that sort of health-seeking behaviors. We need to sensitize, continue to be urgent. We should use these positive lessons learned from polio to ensure that, one, the services are available, two, that people are accessing the service in terms of the seeking behaviors, that the myths about vaccination is actually totally dropped out, should not be there. Because the success in polio means much we could do. Today we have measles, for example, affecting children, meningitis, and so on. Yet these are preventable. Let's use the legacy of the polio to improve the immunization coverage so that we reduce the unfortunate deaths that can be prevented. And this message should really go to all the parents, all individuals. I must say, as a parent, I need to have a healthy child. You have a healthy child, a healthy nation. So the survival of a child should be linked to the prosperity of a nation. And I think that is what WHO, as a secretary of the Ministry of Health, will work with the government, ensuring that the right strategies are used to scale up immunization services in the country.
Thank you very much. Dr. Shuaibu, I know that before now you've had a lot of resistance from parents. Is there what is the percentage of change in attitude? You know, and there was an issue that Dr. Tunji raised now. That is, I go to the hospital to immunize my child, and in 1 week, somebody's knocking on my door and saying, oh, we're immunization people. Can my child still take that again? And then in another 3 months, you know, there's another one that comes and say, oh, we are doing immunization. Can a child still take that again? How many can a child take at the time?
Right. So, in terms of the change in perspective about the safety of the vaccines, looking back from the early 2000s to where we are right now, difference is like day and night, right? So we've seen a massive reduction in terms of non-compliance, refusals, and this has been directly linked to the fact that the polio program took a step back and said, what is the problem? We know these vaccines are safe. What are we not doing right? Right? Why are we not communicating very clearly about the safety of these vaccines, right? So the polio program took a step back and now started engaging with traditional leaders, with religious leaders. So the traditional leaders, who are the leaders at the community level, the religious leaders, they are the ones that now took it upon themselves and communicated very clearly in the local dialects, in the local languages, about how safe these vaccines are and then why the vaccines need to be taken anyway. And when we allowed the traditional institution take over, that is when we saw how people began to not only wait for the vaccines, but they actually demanded for the vaccines in some instances. So you find the situation where we go to communities and parents are not waiting in their households for the vaccinators to come. They actually go to places. And then we also were clear about the fact that it was not good enough for us to take only polio vaccines to the communities, right? So we now understood that people needed, of course, much more than the polio vaccines. We now integrated our services and said even when we go to give polio vaccines, we had health camps where we are also taking blood pressures, we're also treating for malaria. When kids are injured, we also provided first aid. So that integration of services and clear communication about the safety of the vaccines and why the vaccines were required, I think that did a lot of work. But beyond that as well, in communicating very clearly why multiple doses were required, we made it very clear that these vaccines were safe and that as you give more doses, right, it helps boost the immunity. And as you're boosting the immunity of the child, the oral polio vaccine is a weakened live vaccine, right? So when the child passes the vaccine in his stool, it is able to provide immunity to a large number of community members, right? So that is some of the special...
We'll take that again.
Right, okay, so that is a bit technical. So what I was trying to say, and I'll try to bring it down to more understandable terms, right? So there are vaccines that if you take, right, helps protect you as an individual, right? But with the oral polio vaccine, the added advantage is that it provides what we call herd immunity. So what it does is that apart from protecting the person that got the vaccines, right, it is also able to protect people around that individual. So we call it a herd, like a herd of cattle, right? That is what the polio vaccine does. So although you are giving multiple doses, it helps not just the individual, but it helps people in the community. And we're very clear. Again, I have to insist on bringing up the issue of integrity. If, as Nigerians, we had any doubts about the safety of these vaccines, we will not allow them to be given, right? The government is a responsible government, and we're sure that these vaccines are not harmful. This is why we say it is important for us to take multiple doses of these vaccines.
So the multiplicity is not a problem. It's not a problem. So like how many doses could you possibly take in a year?
So typically what we say is that the kids should have a minimum of 3 to 4 doses of the oral polio vaccines. But even if you take as many as 10 doses, it does not have any harmful effect in the body right? So let's be very, very clear about that point.
Yeah.
The multiple doses of oral polio vaccine is helpful. It builds population immunity, and that is a single most important reason why we're here today. That we have been able to carry out these multiple campaigns that have built the population immunity such that the wild polio virus cannot survive in Nigeria. It is massive, right? It is because of the failings, right, and the challenges that other countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan are facing, that they are not able to reach this race like you mentioned it. So I'll put it to you. Tell me, in how many other areas of human endeavor is Nigeria outstripping India, outstripping Pakistan and Afghanistan, right? Those countries are doing quite well. But here we are, where we had even more than twice, thrice the number of white polio viruses some 7-10 years ago. But we've been able to do an incredible job, right? Again, I have to put in place the fact that we used the incident management control system, right? We used the same model that helped us eradicate Ebola to eradicate polio. It is that same model. While you can see what's happening in Congo right now,
Yes,
right?
Congo.
With the Ebola virus outbreak. Over a year. In Nigeria, within a span of 3 months, we stopped Ebola using exactly these strategies. So these strategies are time-proven, they work, and we have no doubt about the fact that we'll use these same strategies to strengthen primary healthcare in Nigeria. So we're on a trajectory. We're close to eradicating wild polio virus. We're improving our routine immunization. Now we're focusing on how we can strengthen primary healthcare. And the federal government, through the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund, is now making funds directly available to the health facilities. So that for several decades, I know the primary healthcare centers in your communities probably had no funding whatsoever.
Yeah.
But now we're getting close to 300,000 or so across to these health facilities on a quarterly basis.
All over the country?
All over the country. Well, of course, we're doing it in phases, right? The federal government in the 2018 budget provided for 55 billion naira for primary healthcare, for insurance schemes, so that over time we will take that much needed journey towards universal health coverage, so that no Nigerian will ever suffer financial risk, catastrophic consequences because of ill health.
Okay.
Right?
I want to ask you specifically.
There's one wondering question to around my mind
Okay.
now.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, as you're talking, of course, for us to achieve that universal health coverage, like you already talked about, somebody watching this morning could say, okay, we've already been talking about it, okay, containing the northeast, northwest, and you talk about trying to contain that which is in the environment as well, even if you don't find it on a particular person. Could it be that down south, we've not recorded any cases like that, or are we totally free, or on the other part of the country is just restricted to one part of the country?
And I want you to take along with it.
Right.
Is there any case of polio virus in Nigeria, the one now as we speak?
So I'll start from your question. Answer is absolutely not. And that is why the process of certification will be done by the World Health Organization. We have used all innovative methods. We used all ways to look for the white polio virus, including in the Northeast. To the best of our knowledge and all the tools that are available, the virus does not exist, right? Because if it existed, we have such a strong surveillance system that we will have picked it up, right? And this is why, because we know that it is not necessarily crossing the 3-year mark that is important. We know that there's still more work. The work is not done. We have to continue searching to make sure that even though we've not found it now, we are not missing any cases. We have to continue immunizing our kids so that we know they are protected. It is not yet Uhuru. We are not rolling out the drums. I say 3 years without white polio virus. Hallelujah. That is not the situation. We know that this is a call for an intensification of the work. Right? We'll continue searching, we'll continue vaccinating, we'll have to improve routine immunization to make sure that when the regional office of the World Health Organization comes and reviews our documents, reviews our surveillance, they'll say, yes, without a single doubt, the whole of the African continent is free of white polio virus. Now, to your questions around the possibility that it might be in the south. Most of the southern states actually eradicated polio for several years, even before the northern states, right? Routine immunization was much better, and then we did not suffer the setback like we did in the early 2000s, where there were issues around the safety of the oral polio vaccines, right? So the southern states actually did a good job of trying to contain it. However, we always say that there should be no complacency. Just because we've now seen white polio viruses, for several years, for several decades in some states, it doesn't mean that it could not creep back, right? We are one nation. People move in different directions. So we cannot rest on our oars. We have to continue searching. As we do search, we still conduct surveillance in the southern states. We still conduct environmental sampling in all of Nigeria. Again,
and
just to make sure.
routine immunization there too.
And then we're pushing up routine immunization in those states as well. We're pushing routine immunization everywhere in the country. Again, if we do not leave this program with any message, the message should be: this is a cautious and fragile success. More work needs to be done to achieve certification.
All right, let's take our tweets, and these are contributions coming from our viewers via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. So remember, you can be a part of this conversation. If you have contributions, you have questions for our guests, just send us a tweet via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. The first tweet is from Pastor Mani Akman. It says, "The federal government and all other relevant agencies must be commended for this great feat. It is the result of the unflinching focus and resilience. It is not a time to rest on our oars, though. One reported case can ruin the whole effort."
Micah Yako tweets, "Big congratulations to all Nigerians for our country being certified, well, about to be, as free poliovirus status. Kudos to government at all levels and regulatory authorities. Mention should also be made of our religious and traditional leaders for good counseling to their subjects. We must extend same to all facets."
Festus Akimboyo tweets, it says that it's 3 years since Nigeria reported a polio case is a landmark in the battle against the disease. The new Minister of Health must ensure that immunization program is sustained. There must be no grounds for complacency.
From Dele Jack Solomon is this straight. "Nigeria should continue on a wide range of innovative strategies to reach children in potential or possible high-risk areas, including opportunistic campaigns that are run whenever security permits, market vaccination, cross-border points, and outreach to nomads to prevent any outbreak."
Ahmed Mohammed tweeted, says, "This has shown that government's commitment towards ensuring Nigeria is free of this disease. However, I still encourage the government to do more to totally eradicate polio in Nigeria."
And Omogbola Bab says, "All hands must be on deck to avoid a relapse. All critical and relevant stakeholders must ensure policies, programs are designed to sustain the tempo. Serious involvement of locals, the traditional institution, is key. Our healthy society is a prosperous society. Congratulations, Nigeria." And
Badamosi H. Adamu tweeted, said, "It's a good development. I commend the government, traditional institutions and community associations for the teamwork. I urge them to be not to be complacent, but to keep it up."
Okay. Titus Monday Knox says, "I congratulate the Nigerian medical community and other international donor agencies for assisting Nigeria attain this feat. But the tempo needs to be sustained and closely monitored to prevent any future outbreaks, especially in rural areas, with vigorous enlightenment and campaigns put in place."
And finally, our last tweet is from Sunny Michael Omakoji. Says, while saying kudos to Nigerians, the government, collaborating NGOs, institutions and individuals for making this feat, I urge them to sustain the tempo. Perhaps accurate data has been a challenge. Hence, one needs to know if this data includes remote parts of Nigeria. Dr. Shoaibu has actually spoken to that, but when we come back, and that's something I actually, ask him to speak to also to the issue of hard to reach areas, very, very remote areas, what they're doing. But just before we continue the conversation, we'll take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. No be only to connect lights.
Come you and yourself now.
Now wow. Oh boy, come down now. Oga Kasali electrician who would look for with this.
Oh.
Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry. I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer because change begins with me.
Oh boy, wetin him talk make sense. Oh boy, make we carry this ladder comot from.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You're welcome back, and if you just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on the NTA. It's, of course, talking about the fact that Nigeria has been wild polio virus free for the last 3 years and on the verge of being confirmed or certified as polio free, and that will be in the next six months. That's a huge challenge for us. We have our guest still seated here. We have Dr. Feja Shuaibu, he's Executive Director of National Primary Health Care. We have Dr. Clement, World Health Organization Officer, and of course Dr. Tuji Fumsho is also Chairman Nigerian National Polio Plus of the Rotary Club International. We still have all of them seated here. Now, I was asking you earlier, Dr. Shuaibu, a question that was raised in our tweets. How strong or how good is your data monitoring system? How efficient it is? And what are you doing about children that are hard to reach areas, very remote areas? What do you do to reach those children?
So the polio program in Nigeria has government working with development partners, with our donors, in what we call the National Polio Emergency Operations Center. In that center, we have world-class innovative technology that is brought to bear in the polio eradication effort. So, for example, when our vaccinators go out to the field, they go with mobile phones that makes it possible for us to track exactly how they are able to reach the most remote areas on the map, right? So we have all communities mapped, but how do we make sure that even in that corner of the most remote communities that we're actually reaching them? Not only do we have supervisors making sure that that happens, but using technology that cannot lie, you can see if an individual has actually reached that community and has provided vaccines, right? And this information is sent real time to the center. So we're there and there's a dashboard that shows exactly all the communities that are being reached. Because if you leave any child behind, that child now becomes vulnerable, and that child could be the nidus for an outbreak of wild polio virus. The reason why we feel pretty confident that we've done such a great job of looking for viruses everywhere in Nigeria is because we know we're reaching these most remote areas with the most up-to-date innovative technology. I'll tell you again about what we call Avadar. Avadar is a technology that was developed in Nigeria. Absolutely. And that technology is now being used in 9 other African countries under the leadership of the World Health Organization. So we developed the app in Nigeria, and the World Health Organization is making sure that even that technology is used everywhere in Africa.
So how does the technology work? So at least for the benefit of those who want to...
Excellent. So in relation to making sure that we have information from every nook and cranny. So there are places maybe in riverine areas, on mountains, in very hard to reach areas where people are not able to go on a regular basis to find out what is going on in terms of surveillance. In case people are falling sick, how do we make sure that information from those remote areas are coming? We've given mobile phones to a lot of those community members, to traditional leaders, village heads in those communities, to volunteers, such that on a weekly basis, like every Friday, 10 o'clock, there is an image that pops up on the phone of the traditional leader and asks the traditional leader in his dialect, in his language, and says, have you seen any child that is displaying weakness which could be polio related? And the traditional leader can say yes or no. If he says yes, it goes to a server and it triggers a report from the central level, from the local government headquarters, to say, oh, in this very remote area, there's a possibility that there's a wild polio virus or anything that looks like polio, and there's an investigation. Even if there is none, right? The traditional leader will say, no, there's been no child that has this type of symptoms. And we're still collecting information, because even a zero report saying no means that you are looking. And those are the things that the World Health Organization will be looking at when they come for certification, to make sure that even in the most remote areas, there's evidence that we're searching everywhere.
Okay, before we get to the other gentlemen, still with you quickly, we know all information as that the polio virus is asymptomatic. So how do you get the people trained, especially for those who are not in the medical circles? I know you make use of various people to actually reach out in terms of your advocacy and enlightenment. So how do you get them to understand what to look out for? You just raised the issue of the traditional ruler maybe having to say, okay, have you seen any child? What should they look out for? What do they tell parents and other members in the communities?
Right, so the great thing about the polio eradication program and poliomyelitis is that it's so obvious. The symptomatology is very, very obvious, right? Very unlike maybe a cancer. Somebody can have a cancer, and unless you go through very rigorous processes, you may not be able to detect it, right? But if a child has polio, the weakness or paralysis of any of the limbs, either the upper or the lower limbs, either the legs or the arms, is indicative that this child might have polio. So it's easier, very easy to train people who are not even in the medical field how to identify this. And in terms of really going to the details, that is when, if there's a report, there are people who are senior, right, to those volunteers that will now come and validate that this is actually the case. So the symptoms are relatively easy to understand. And then we make it a policy to do training and retraining of the volunteers and even the health workers on a regular basis. So we build their capacities around how they can use the technology, how they can do identification of kids that have these types of paralysis. So that is very, very critical, that we do not send anybody to the field unless we're sure that they are well trained.
Okay. All right. Dr. Funsho, earlier on, Dr. Shaibu talked about the call for intensification of what we've done so far. And already we're also looking at the issue of the political will amongst the different partners. Counterpart funding, which is still key. Rotary is doing its own bit, like you said, trying to use Rotarians wherever they are found in such locality to reach the government of the day. How critical should this be for us moving forward, especially for those states that have not really maybe lived up to what it should be to actually get it on the right footing? Political will, financial administration, and the wherewithal.
It's a very, very critical component of the next, stage to get us to the next milestone and beyond. I always say you cannot shave a man's head in his absence. And we all know that majority of our governors now are first-time governors. So what my committee has done in our strategy is to reach out to these governors on a one-to-one. With the support of the statistics from primary healthcare and WHO, we engage them and show them their scorecard. This is what your state has been doing. This is how you score. Routine immunization, there's a state that has 93%, and we have a state that's at 7.3%. And we also show them issues that has to do with human resource. We show them issues that has to do with their primary healthcare infrastructure. We show them issues of staffing, non-staffing replacements, and so on. We've already engaged the governor of Nasarawa State, Benue State, and Oyo State. And 2 nights ago, we made a presentation to the Nigerian Governors Forum, giving a general picture of where the country is, what needs to be done. And our program is to engage all the governors within the next 14 months on a one-to-one basis, even after that presentation. The idea is that new governors need to know what is on ground, what needs to be done, because polio is not the only thing on their plate.
Sure.
So it's going to take them a while, to get to know everything, whether it's health, whether it's housing, whether it's sanitation. But we want to put this on the front burner because we've gone so far, we've done so well, and we want to ensure that they also start, running as far as polio is concerned. So we're engaging them, using, our contacts, with them, to familiarize them with the program and also give them indications of where we need to be at for certification.
Dr. Peters, let's get your take. How important is funding and collaboration from other stakeholders?
Thank you very much. We need to sustain the gains or even do more. And of course, besides the funding, I'm very happy that the moderator asked the issue of the leadership. It's very important. This immunization, not only because of polio, but immunization should be high on the agenda. And this is a critical, and I'm happy that it is one of the targets within the Sustainable Development Goals. So that leadership is required. The second thing that is very important is domestic resource mobilization. This is really critical, and it can sustain a lot of the health interventions, including immunizations. Now, there are many ways to get domestic resource mobilization. I'm sure our economists will help us how to mobilize. That makes us first sustain the services, but also improves the resilience and ownership. Those are critical. Immunization should not depend solely on donations from outside, which makes it more vulnerable. Because this is a critical thing. If we're able to ensure that we minimize avoidable death from children, something that can be vaccinated, prevented, that is the right step to building a strong nation. We learn lessons from countries that have done it. You look at the context of Nigeria, the biggest GDP probably in Africa, the biggest opportunities in Africa. And if Nigeria can do it, then the whole of Africa will definitely shine. And the will is there. I already see the will is there. The leadership is there. We need to get the conversation more. Because given the configuration of the country, a lot of really the marks we get at the state, local government, the ward and the community levels. So this is why we should carry the dialogue. Get the main actors, the government, the private sector, traditional leaders, religious leaders, and the communities last sustained the gains that we have.
All right, other pledging moments are expected, no doubt. How do we begin to ramp up actions towards that?
Well, I think one important thing is that from the global thinking, already how do we transition the polio investments? And one of the things in the country is to look at what business case do we have, given the assets that are already massive to address polio. How do you transition that? Which the government is clear on that, how it likes to transition these assets in terms of using the primary healthcare services to attain universal health coverage, as I said, but also improving the surveillance. Now, the global funding, global envelope will start shrinking as we get certified polio-free. It means the local resources should come up gradually to fill this gap. And this process, of course, involves the dialogue. We have this conversation with the executive, with the legislative, with the private sector, so that I'm sure the context of Nigeria, I believe that not far away, maybe one day, within few years, Nigeria will produce the vaccines here. And this will cut down the whole cost of everything. So the opportunities are very high in this country. And there's one of the partners, and a close partner to the government of Nigeria, Minister of Health, definitely we promote this dialogue to ensure that we increase the resource mobilization at the local level to sustain the gains.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Peters. Now, Dr. Schreiber, before we take...
Let him respond to that as well. The pledging moment is to already talk about the kind of dialogue we should be holding. You may wish to respond to that.
Right. I mean, we're very prepared in terms of the conversations that are already taking place around how we will gradually transit from a program that is heavily subsidized by donors and development partners to a program that will gradually see domestic funding increase. The government of President Muhammadu Buhari has gone into a partnership with all donors and development partners around how in the course of the next 10 years will be assured of vaccine supply through the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. But the conversation that we're now having with the World Health Organization and other partners is how do we ensure that all of these resources, financial, human, material resources that we've built up and has helped us succeed with near polio eradication, how do we ensure that all of those resources are not wasted, right? How do we transit those same resources to strengthen the health system? Why is this important? This is important because when we eradicated smallpox, the global community did not do a good job of sustaining those resources into strengthening the health system. So when we started with polio eradication, practically we had to start from scratch with Rotary International providing leadership, right? So we don't want that to happen again. This is why we're saying that all the lessons we've learned around how to do communication very clearly, mobilize communities towards a common focus, technology, like some of the technologies that we're using in this program are actually being developed in Nigeria and are being replicated in Afghanistan and Pakistan. How do we make sure we sustain that?
So. I was actually surprised because actually I've seen that technology used in East Africa for women who are in hard-to-reach areas that are pregnant, just to ensure that no mother dies and no child. So when they have issues with that phone, they get messages and they can actually reach out. And I must say that's a very good one. But then I'm going to ask you, in the next 6 months, what should we be doing?
In the next 6 months, we have to do three things. Intensify the work that is being done. Intensify the work that is being done. Intensify the work that is being done. We cannot overemphasize the fact that we cannot rest. So when I say intensify the work that's being done, what is the work that is being done? We have to improve our surveillance. We have to continue to get information about any child anywhere in Nigeria that comes down with weakness or paralysis of any of the limbs. We have to increase routine immunization. And this is why we keep making the clarion call to the governors and LGA chairmen that funding has to be provided for routine immunization and primary health care. But apart from providing the funding, also ensure that that funding is being efficiently used. So it's not just the money being provided, but make sure that you track the fund and make sure that they are being efficiently used. We have to continue to communicate to our communities that the work is not done and that it is a stakeholder's responsibility to make sure we do cross the finish line. We are at the point where we are almost crossing the finish line, but it takes so much work, sustained work, for us to get it done.
And like the case of Ebola that you actually mentioned earlier, everybody We've all gone to sleep. I'm sure a lot of people don't wash their hands as regularly as they used to.
Right.
I'm sure a lot of people don't have hand sanitizers in their handbags anymore, and they just shake anybody and touch anywhere. After the next 6 months, that's always been the problem when you talk about the Nigerian factor. So after the next 6 months, do you already have a plan on ground on what is going to happen, how you're going to sustain this, how you're going to increase the awareness?
Yes, we do have. Again, in collaboration with our partners, we have the polio endgame, right? And we have all the strategies that we need to adopt using lessons from countries that have also eradicated to ensure that we don't forget what we've learned and how we're able to use these lessons very well. For example, in Nigeria, we're using the polio resources, just like you mentioned earlier. It was the same polio resources that we used to rapidly stop Ebola, right? And this is why, for me, some of our heroes in Nigeria are the men and women, Nigerians, non-Nigerians, who are working in the polio eradication operation center. The folks who worked in the Ebola operation centers, those guys work day and night. And if you go to the polio emergency operation center, you find them midnight, they're still working. All of those lessons around hard work, around selfless service to the fatherland, those are lessons that we have to carry on to other areas. So, for example, a few months ago, at the Federal Ministry of Health, we declared a state of emergency on the number of women and children dying every day in Nigeria. We're going to use the same polio resources, the same models, the same strategies that we've learned. Of course, we tweak them a little bit so that in Nigeria we stop having a situation where every day is almost like a plane crash of pregnant women because we have close to 140 women dying every day due to pregnancy and delivery. Absolutely. Yes, so we have to pull in all the resources that we have amassed from the polio eradication program to make sure that our women stop dying, that our kids under 5 stop dying due to perfectly preventable causes, and we will do it.
All right, thank you very much. And gentlemen, we have other tweets, but most of them are reacting to some of the things we've already talked about. And there is this one from Chima Onoka trying to ask the ED to tell us more about the Avada, which appear to be used for surveillance. I think you've already explained that. Perhaps by the time you sent this, we had not talked about it. So we appreciate you, Mutana Farouk, Usman Banikantu, Comrade Alaji Ngala, Ibrahim Modu Aji, Chris Simeon, Law Alpha C, Ibrahim Modu Aji again, Chris Simeon again, and also the Chima Onoka talked about. Thank you very much, because they're all just appreciating what we've done so far. And the other person was even trying to explain what poliomyelitis is all about, since you have already taken time to explain that to us.
All right, let's get, gentlemen, let's begin to get your closing thoughts on the program. Dr. Tunji, let's get your closing thought. What should we be doing from your own perspective? What should be the next plan?
Yes. You know, we're quite excited that we've reached this first milestone. But I always want to remind people that, you know, this whole program is about us getting to the child with the polio vaccine before the wild polio virus gets to the child. So that is the race. The race is not against the calendar. The race is between us getting to the child with the vaccine before the wild polio virus gets to the child. And I think if we keep this in mind going forward, we'll continue to ensure that every child below the age of 5 gets immunized against polio for as long as there's polio in any part of the world. I remind people that the United States was declared a polio-free country in 1957. And as I speak, all children below the age of 5 in the United States are still immunized against polio. Because any case of polio in any part of the world is a danger to any child anywhere in the world. It's only a plane ride away. We should also remember that adults do carry the polio virus. So an adult male or female from any part of the world, particularly in those areas that are still endemic, all they need to do is to travel to an environment where immunization coverage is very low and pollute the environment with the wild polio virus, and pronto, we're back to square one. So we need to bear that in mind, that immunization should continue until we ensure that we've filled the gap that we have now as far as routine immunization is concerned, and sustain it at that level until the world is declared polio-free.
Let us raise that point about even adults being able to carry such virus around.
And that was why the point Dr. Fraser made earlier, that, when you have a child
multiple
doses,
it can touch
that's one thing I'm living with. It has a way of protecting adults. Maybe when they stool or when they urinate, it has a way of protecting the adults around the environment.
Okay. So what should be key priority for the communities themselves now? Because we've talked about what all the stakeholders should do, government agencies, donor agencies. Now, the communities and all the societal movement generally, what should we do?
Thank you. The first message is, as long as some countries still have wild polio virus, the risk is there. Pakistan, Afghanistan still have cases. It means the risk is there. So we must be vigilant. The message, the communities, to the parents, let's take advantage to have every child that is eligible vaccinated, because that's why we can protect all the children of this country. The second message is that not only the polio alone, the routine immunization is still low. It means we need to promote the vaccination against measles, meningitis, and other vaccine-preventable diseases. So let's take advantage of the availability of the vaccines and make sure every Nigerian child is vaccinated and protected. Our children should not die.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clement Peters. Dr. Fraser Shaibu, providing active leadership on the eradication of polio in Nigeria is a debt owed to Nigerians. What do you have to say to Nigerians about this? What assurance do you have to give them?
First and foremost, I want to seize this opportunity to appreciate the President, Muhammadu Buhari, because when we had a resurgence in 2016, his rapid decision to charge the Federal Ministry of Health and the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency to look for more viruses and make sure that we pick out all the viruses, and then providing the resources immediately, 9.8 billion naira, to make sure that we contain the outbreak. This is what has led to this point in time where we went 3 years without a single wild polio virus. Secondly, I have met with a lot of governors, and I'm excited about this crop of governors and how they have committed themselves to providing more resources towards health, especially primary health care, and how they will provide leadership with the local government chairman to ensure that routine immunization is improved. I believe very strongly that with the efforts of Nigerians working at the National Polio Emergency Operations Center, the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, our development partners and donors, we will not rest until we are certified polio-free. It is a debt that we owe to Nigerians. It is the hallmark of our service and sacrifice to Nigerians. It is not about lip service. It is actually doing what we say we will do. I believe that a wind of change is blowing in the health sector in Nigeria, and these types of results are going to come to Nigerians. It's a new trajectory in the narrative. We have new ministers that have just come on board and have committed themselves. I believe that with the kind of enthusiasm that we have, all we need to do is sustain the effort, and we will celebrate a polio-free Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fraser Shaibu, Executive Director, National Primary Health Care Development Agency. Thank you for your thoughts and time on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
A very big thank you to Dr. Clement Peters, World Health Organization Officer in Charge. Thank you for coming on the program.
You're welcome.
And also, Dr. Tunji Funsho is the past Governor and Chairman, Nigeria National Polio Plus Committee of the Rotary International. We thank you so much for taking your time out to be with us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. our complimentary segment, Sports is First.